about why he or she believes they should be on the commission. Then we will go through the board, that is, we have traditionally gone through the board one person at a time, and each of us asks a question of the candidate, and then we can ask a follow-up that when they answer the first part, we may have further questions and want to follow up, or we may not. We go all the way through the board with that first question. And then, if the board wishes, we go through a second time with a second question from all of the board members who wish to ask another question, and they have an opportunity to ask a follow-up at that point too. And then, after all the candidates have made their presentations, we each have 20 points. There's 5 of us, so that's adds up to 100 points to award.
Good morning. Welcome
We
back.
sit here and calculate out, figure out who we want to award them to, with the limitation being that we cannot give more than 10 of our points to any one applicant. That way no one board member can overly sway it one way or another. There's no obligation to give out all 20 points, but one might give 10 to somebody and 7 to somebody and 3 to someone else, or whatever we wish to do that does not exceed 10 to anyone and does not exceed the total of 20. And then the board secretary will add up the points after she collects all our old papers with our numbers on it and tell us how they came out, first, second, third, and then someone on the board will move to forward names to the governor for his consideration. By law, we must send him a minimum of 2 names and a maximum of 5. Since we only have 4 applicants appearing today, we're not going to be exceeding the 5 for sure, but we could send them all, or we could send 2 or 3. So that's fairly a summary of what I understand.
Thank you, Shelley. Matt?
I don't have anything to add. She covered it very well.
Yeah. The next thing we need to do is go on disclosures and records. If anybody, I'll start with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am familiar with Ms. Manuel in that we both volunteer for the same conservation and organization in Arizona, but I do not know her personally, so I have no reason to recuse myself for any of the candidates.
I've reviewed the list of people we're going to interview this morning. The only one I have heard from in the past is Jeffrey Buchanan. I don't know him. I'm just familiar with him as a prior applicant, but I have no reason to recuse myself from considering him.
I also have reviewed the list, and the only, I have nobody to, I feel that I have to recuse myself of. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have the same situation. I do not personally know any of the candidates and know of 1 or 2, but that's all. Have no reason to recuse myself.
Mr. Chairman, I have no disclosures or recusals. I know none of the candidates.
When are we ready for our first candidate? 9:15, or can we start a little early?
Mr. Chairman, our first candidate is here, so Maddie is going to
Real good.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot hear the secretary.
testing.
I think you're on. I think
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, there you go.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think we should also introduce our AG rep and our secretary.
Absolutely, that was my fault.
Cindy Freehoff, Board Secretary. Linda Pollock, Attorney General's Office.
And we're really glad to have you.
Really, really, really bad.
Really bad. Is this our first candidate? Welcome.
Good morning, well,
Do you want to do a little introduction and we'll lead into the questions?
sure, thank you. My name is Brian Kenny.
Please move your mic up.
Let's try that. Can you hear me? Hi, my name is
No, you're not on yet, I don't believe. There should be a little button down
At the bottom.
at the base.
Green light.
Brian.
You see
There we go.
Oh,
You
that's-
got it?
Very good, thank you. Good morning. My name is Brian Kenny. I'm from Flagstaff, Arizona, and I applied for the job to be on the commission. I'm a lifelong resident, grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and spent years working for state and federal agencies. I have had some experience working with game and fish in the past in my other previous jobs at the State Land Department and other agencies. And I've always enjoyed the work that the Game and Fish Commission did and does. And I thought that it would be a wonderful opportunity for me to help move the organization in ways that could benefit the public of Arizona. I wanted to tell you that I think I fit the need for the position you're seeking because of my interests, my personal interests primarily. I grew up appreciating nature, agriculture, water, and wilderness in Arizona. Was one of those free-range kids who wandered the state for many years and had an appreciation for the outdoors as well as people. I went on to get a degree in anthropology because I love people, and I earned an MBA in international management because I was interested in quality management of all types of organizations. So I believe in government and I believe in systems and that they should be tested and they should work well. And I think that good governance is a thing that's really important in this world. We could set up a system, but we have to be prepared to revise it and improve it. And I want to step forward and do that type of work in an orderly fashion. So I noticed that on the commission, rules that were sent to me, or the commission, I'm sorry, the statute that was sent to me, the commission had several things that were on that page that interested me. First of all, there were 9 things on there that the commission shall do. So I take that word to be very important, shall do. And those things involved rules, policies, enforcement, services, programs, information to the public, managing funds, and exercising powers and duties by showing leadership, working with everyone, and cooperating with Mexico and universities on research issues. Well, all those sorts of tasks are the things I've done throughout my career, so I'm well primed to do that type of work. I've worked within state and federal agencies and have engaged in enforcement action, provided services to the public, ran programs, provided information to the public and to the media. I've managed funds and personnel, and worked with everyone in management to make sure that the programs that I operated functioned well. There are several things on that list that I saw that were things that the commission may do. And I think they involve investigations, preservation, operating facilities, teaching safety, permits for fish and game, research, agreements, etc. Those are the things where imagination comes in, because they may do, they aren't required, but they're important to make the program run. So my goal is to try to come to this organization with a fresh talent and imagination to make those things happen where we can agree to make them go forward. So I saw that list of items as very, very important guiding principles for me to follow, the shall do and the may do's. And I think that I would like to work with you to make the programs of the Game and Fish Department happen in a way that earns the respect and trust of the public in Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now I'm going to the question portion, and I'd like to lead off with my usual question, and then we'll go to Ms. Phil. The first question is, a major key to having an effective 5-member commission is having every member attend and participate in every meeting. Given your current occupation and other obligations, are you able to fulfill this tremendous commitment of time to serve as a commissioner?
I believe in service to the community, and I live in Flagstaff. It's a short hop from there to Phoenix. I come on a regular basis. I also happen to be retired. I'm working on several projects on my own and with others, but I have time to serve on a commission, and so the answer is definitely yes.
Okay, and you're aware of the monthly meetings?
Yes, sir.
We have 2 work sessions a year that usually consume most of the weekend. So, and there's other obligations to other groups that interact with the Game and Fish. So,
Yes, I understood that, and having worked with Game and Fish members in the past in various capacities in my other roles, I realized that they have a big presence around the state of Arizona in certain times of the year more than others, and a lot of public interface, and so I'm prepared to do that,
and we
yes.
do travel.
I do travel, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Commissioner Shelton? You're up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so thank you for being here, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for applying. My husband and I live on the border in Arivaca, Arizona, and ranch there. The challenges that we face include dealing with federal agencies, that would be Fish and Wildlife, State Land Department is a state agency, but other agencies. And part of the job of a commissioner is to help the state of Arizona advance its interests in wildlife and habitat. And would you like to comment on that subject, please?
I think cooperation is an important issue, and when it involves multiple agencies at different levels, it becomes a little convoluted at times, but it is important that we engage in cooperation and try to make things happen that improve our systems. I was a GS-14 in the U.S. federal government and stood before congressmen, elected officials, and the public to explain programs and to help adjust them and move them forward. It included the actual physical plans on the ground, plus also the finances, and also the agreement documents that we'd have to sign to make things happen. So I have great experience with doing that type of work. Agencies all have their vested interests, and having been a local employee, a county employee, a state employee, and a federal employee, I understand the mindsets of many of these individuals who come to the commission or work with the commission, and how they think and what their interests are and what their needs are. So I think I could represent the commission very readily because I have that experience. I've dealt with these individuals in my career throughout the last 45 years. Thank you.
My follow-up to that question is, southern Arizona has problems that aren't quite as intense in northern Arizona, and that is specifically the border. And I wonder if you're aware that the Game and Fish Department has had to post signs on roads in our area that say, caution, illegal activities, transport of narcotics and other contraband may occur in these hunt areas. And one of those hunt areas is 36B, which is where we live. And so that means that you are also having to interface with the Border Patrol, another federal agency, and Homeland Security. Do you have any observations on that subject?
Well, first of all, thank you. I've been down to your neck of the woods on many occasions, not so much recently, but when I worked for the Arizona State Land Department, I was down there regularly. Those issues began even before I worked for them, and you used to see signs like that. I worked for the Park Service in southern Arizona for a few years, and I managed working with staff from 11 different parks, and some of them are right very close to the border. And I would go down to some of the parks and late at night, because I had to travel, and I'd see people crossing the highway in front of me, and lots of activity out in the desert, in the parks and elsewhere. So I've seen it directly. I've talked to people out in the desert, and I've talked to the Border Patrol individuals who are out there working. I've seen some really interesting things. I've seen when I was interested in making sure that, for example, state lands or Park Service lands were well protected and respected. I'd have all sorts of issues with illegal aliens coming across the border and leaving trash behind and other activities. But I'd also see the Border Patrol building facilities right next to a historic building, within 2 feet of the building. And they say, oh, well, we didn't touch the footprint of the building, so we haven't harmed anything. And they were right, in a sense. So there's complicated issues that go on. People have different interpretations about how to get their jobs done and what to do to make themselves more effective. I can't address all of the issues, but I know that I've worked with these people on many occasions and had to express my agency's opinion and proposal to move forward or to change things to make them better. So I'm very good at standing up and talking to people and looking them in the face and understanding what their needs are, why they're acting the way they are, what they're doing administratively, and then trying to come to some solution if a change is required. So I'm very comfortable with doing that type of work, and I've seen what's going on in your neck of the woods. And it would be something very important for Game and Fish to stay involved in, because we have interests down there with wildlife and with other activities and programs that Game and Fish sponsor. So we need to stay actively engaged. I think I'm the guy that could do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your
Thank you.
applying. It's a big job. Somebody's got to do it, right?
Sure.
Okay. Can you name 1 or 2 ideas or innovations that you would like to bring to the Arizona Game and Fish Department, should you be appointed commissioner?
I think one of the ideas that we need to work on, if we aren't already working on it, is to, be aware of what's happening to game and fish and resources in the future, not the present, but also the future. So I have had experience of looking at applications online, different apps on phones and computers that allow people to gather information and do things that we never could do before. And it involves mapping, it involves ownership records, it involves a lot of different types of data put together in new ways that allow people information. And this is great for the public. But for the Game and Fish Commission, we need to be aware of how people are interacting with the resources on the land, with animals, and when those apps are being used in a particularly erroneous or untoward way. So in other words, there are people out there who will follow the rules and engage with game and fish and hunt and fish and do everything properly. Then there's always that 1 or 2 individuals who decide that they're going to use technology to advance their own interests despite what the rules and policies say. So I think some advanced intelligence on understanding what sort of technologies are impacting Arizona Game and Fish and the resources is a worthwhile thing to engage in. I don't know what that means at this point in time, but I know that if we're not aware of what tools people are using, then we're behind the curve. So we need to be aware of that and engage with people. And really do some research and maybe, write a white paper or talk with other law enforcement officials about how we can better understand our intelligence environment regarding our resources that we're trying to preserve and manage.
I have another question real quickly that I always like to ask. Do you have a current hunting or fishing license?
Actually, I don't right now. I've stopped hunting because I have I wear devices in my ears, and loud noises just exacerbate my hearing loss. And so I've stopped hunting personally. So I hunt with a camera these days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kenny, thank you for coming today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your interest in this position. If you would, please describe the funding sources for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And do you have any thoughts for additional revenue sources that the department might explore?
Sure. Well, I understand that the legislature has the authority to establish a budget for the state, and some of that is involves this Game and Fish Department. And it gets adjusted quite regularly or in ways that are unexpected. There was a time when monies from the state lottery were going to go to Game and Fish and to historic preservation, and then the legislature said, well, we'll now adjust budgets because now lottery monies are coming in. So these are issues in the past, but I bring them up because I think there's always the issue of where the legislature is going to put their emphasis and how they're going to adjust the budget from year to year. So I would pay particularly close attention to what the legislature is doing and talk with those members of the legislature who are on the various committees that would have a say in how Game and Fish is funded from the state. You also have revenues from activities that Game and Fish funds. I don't know what the numbers are. I haven't looked at your annual report in terms of permits and other activities. So I can't comment on that directly because I don't know how much revenue is coming in or how those funds are distributed at this point in time. So I think those two sources of revenue adjust over time. The one source of revenue that I think is unpredictable, more unpredictable, is probably gifts to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission through donations, through wills, things like that. I also don't know how much money is coming in from the public to support programs, or from a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur who wants to donate money to see something happen. That could also include not only monies, but lands that might be deeded to Game and Fish for various uses. I think it's very important to work with donors to figure out if they're interested in our programs and they want to contribute, and that's something that I would love to do in terms of a future activity. Those issues aren't highly specific in most annual reports, so I don't know what the numbers are at this point in time. But those are the things that I would work on. I would work on the legislature. I'd work on making sure the permit system is adequate and funded properly and that the revenues are coming in. And I would work on speaking with donors and entrepreneurs who are interested in contributing to the system.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny, for coming in this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The question I've got for you, one of the 7 principles of the North American model of wildlife conservation is that wildlife sources are conserved and held in trust for all citizens. How do you see that belief integrating with the ongoing role of the Arizona Game and Fish Department and Commission?
So managing the commons is a very difficult thing because there's wide varieties of opinions of how to do that at any specific point in time. But when we have a fiduciary responsibility as a trustee to manage resources and protect them for the future, we have to take that very seriously. I think the way that I approach that is to talk with people widely and do a lot of open source intelligence gathering. I don't use the word intelligence in some sort of secretive way. I'm talking about open source, talking to people widely, finding out what their interests are, what their capabilities are, how they perform, what they're willing to do, and how they could cooperate with us, and how those resources need to be managed. We have another source of information other than the general public and agencies and politicians and the public at large. That other source of information are professionals in practice who are very interested in conservation of resources. So there are wildlife biologists, zoologists, a number of different people who have long years of expertise. I believe in expertise. I believe in listening to those individuals and finding out what they have to say about what's happening with our populations. One of the biggest problems I think we're facing in Arizona right now is long-term drought. And we need to speak with professionals and scientists about how we can manage resources better, how we can manage populations better when the water supply seems to be shaky. We like to take a lot of that water for ourselves, and so we drain groundwater, we move water around, and we impact it in various ways. And we pollute it, we clean it up, but we do a lot of things to it, and some of those things we think might be beneficial. At the same time, we could be harming populations of wildlife that depend on those water sources. So we need to speak to the professionals and find out what they know or what they could learn in the future. I have no problem with trying to fund them to find out important questions about how we manage that water into the future. So I think that would be one of my focuses, would be a focus on water and working with people widely to gather good information, interpret it, and figure out how to use it to protect the resource.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the candidate? Ms. Tillman?
Second question. The federal government has many sorts of designations of land, especially, and you are probably quite familiar with them in our state experience. But they range from designations that permit the maintenance of water structures and permit fire management and control and permit actions to address bark beetle infestations, and other designations make those management actions very difficult. One of those designations is wilderness, and there's ever increasing effort to designate large portions of, especially the southern portion of the state, as wilderness. And when those wilderness areas abut the border, then legal management or sports activities are strictly limited, and illegal activities proliferate because you don't have the hunters camps everywhere that discourage some kinds of bad behavior. I'm thinking of some wildernesses in particular where they literally abut the border and become freeways for importation drugs north through highways that they reach, major highways like I-10, which crosses this country. So if you come up through a wilderness and get to I-10, you're from coast to coast without interdiction. And interdiction activities are quite difficult. Even fire suppression is difficult.
Oh dear, thank you very much. All right, I failed to turn that on. I hope you could hear me.
I did hear you so far, thank you.
In any case, do you have any comments on that?
I like wilderness a lot. I spend a lot of time in wilderness. I'm a long-distance solo hiker. I've walked portions of the Arizona Trail, not the entire trail, but that would be one of my goals. I've spent years visiting wildernesses and camping in them and practicing wilderness techniques to not leave a trace. So I understand that ethic and I appreciate it and I love it. I go out with my camera, I take pictures of the wildlife, take pictures of the plants, take pictures of the landscape and the geology, and it's very enlightening for me and enjoyable when I share it with others. I also understand that there are lots of resources in the state of Arizona that can be picked off little by little and disappear because nobody's watching it or nobody has control of it. So we see that with fuel wood, we see that with rock mineral products, we see that with archaeological sites, we see that with animals. And what I've learned over the years is the way that you help protect these resources of various types is to put people on the landscape and have eyes on the landscape. And so we're not engaged in Game and Fish in being the interdiction agency, but we need to cooperate with Border Patrol so that they can do their job. One of the things that I think could happen is have a program with Game and Fish where if there's a wilderness area that's designated, that we find ways to get the public to participate in that wilderness in all the traditional ways that people participate in wilderness, because there are eyes and ears on the ground to help solve problems like illegal border crossing. So that sounds like it could be a little bit dangerous. You're putting public individuals out there in the middle of a wilderness to enjoy the wilderness, but there's danger that lurks around. I don't think that's a problem. I think that having those people to coordinate and work with various agencies, with Game and Fish or with Border Patrol, having them there is a valuable tool, and we should take advantage of it. So I see living within the rules of a wilderness designation, and then making sure that if people can enjoy that wilderness, that we find ways to get them there so that they can do that. At the same time, we remind them that, if they see something, they should say something. So that's an old tagline from other programs, but we can adapt that sort of attitude to Game and Fish, have our hunters and our public participate with other agencies to make sure that the landscape and the resources are as safe as possible. So I see public participation as a big plus if we have wilderness area and we can invite people to enjoy that wilderness.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question to that. I'm sure you realize that not all of the public is physically able to access wilderness. And it's, there are challenges and limitations. And the more of the state that has layers of designation on it, then the population's increasing and the area available for the general public to recreate is shrinking. So that you have even greater impacts on, say, just the national forest lands. When you shut off this, you increase the impact on the rest. Can you comment on that, please?
Well,